And don't you want a president that's going to make America healthy again?
Transmitter 42. Friday's speech from RFK Jr. and subsequent tacit endorsement of Trump's presidential bid helped snuff out utterly the customary bump a political party receives from their presidential election year convention. RFK Jr. nuked his own party from orbit. Today, Kimberley and I discussed the loudly trumpeted health warning from Mr. Kennedy and folded in with other sources that convey a dire and urgent call to action to identify why America is so unhealthy. There's little doubt this populist merger is tenuous, but the highlight on American health is most welcome.
And I want to ask you again, don't you want a safe environment for your children? Don't you want to know that the food that you're feeding them is not filled with chemicals that are going to give them cancer and chronic disease? And don't you want a president that's going to make America healthy again?
I do.
Thank you all very, very much, and God bless you, and God bless America.
May we live in interesting times. A unity party of a kind. What do you think? I thought that was a very fabulous Friday, especially to deflate the energy that obviously happens after a convention ends. Not your usual Friday news dump. So what do you think about RFK Jr.'s message there?
I'm excited. It was nice to get it out in the mainstream media, public, whatever you want to call it, from a politician, because we don't usually hear that from any of them. I'm excited, but I'm tempering my enthusiasm. I'm cautiously optimistic, hoping that it works out for the best.
He conveys a caring attitude about the health of America. He's identified the same things that we have all seen, the health degradation over time of general America. You've highlighted several things in the past episodes, and you're pretty much overlapping with what he's saying.
Well, I would agree, and just a side note, anyone out there if you haven't heard the speech in its entirety, I would suggest you go back, and I would actually suggest you don't just go back to the first one that he had originally in the afternoon of Friday before he went and spoke at the Trump event. He talks about a lot more than health, but I really do feel like I saw it live, and for me, it was a historic speech. It is, and I mean, I would literally, in my life, it's definitely my top 5 of speeches I've ever heard. He covered a lot. It's not even about being political. So if you're like, oh, I don't want to hear anything political, you just need to hear it as an American, I think.
This speech was important enough for most of the networks to cut it off at certain points that challenged their way of being.
Unfortunately, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So I think it's very important as an American. You hear what he had to say. Whether you agree with it, don't agree with it, whatever. And I especially think if you have children, if you have grandchildren, if you hope to have grandchildren one day, I think you need to really listen to what he has to say and maybe consider some new information, maybe that you're going to hear for the first time today.
Of course, health of a nation is what's the term I'm looking for?
It's a national security issue.
Thank you. I think he views it in that sense.
He should. Everyone should.
I suppose Trump does as well. I can't quite read Trump, but who can? But this is a very brilliant move that happened on Friday for all involved. But let's focus on the health aspects.
Right. I just want to say, I think maybe because you mentioned it right there, I don't really know how concerned Trump is with health. I think he has been, certainly in this second campaigning, he has been made more aware, and by certain people who have, kind of tapped him on the shoulder and said, hey, this needs to be looked at. And just real quick, if you want some more information, one of those people would be a gentleman by the name of Callie Means. And I know just from him personally, he said he had contacted the Trump campaign, and he had been working with the Kennedy campaign, and he's kind of all over social media right now. You can go anywhere and Google his name, and probably, I don't know how many interviews will pop up. But Robert F. Kennedy mentioned him and his sister, actually, when he was talking about health the other day. So if you want some other sources, there's a book called Good Energy that his sister Casey wrote. Casey's a doctor, and he's the co-author. And she's a physician, Stanford trained, top of her class. And his background is he's basically a pharmaceutical whistleblower. He was in the pharmaceutical industry for some time, so they kind of know of what they speak. So I go see the RFK Jr. speech. Go
on Twitter,
right? You can find the book Good Energy. It's for sale now. Or you can go and find Casey and Callie Means being interviewed on the Tucker Carlson podcast. Now, whatever you think about Tucker Carlson, doesn't really matter. Just go and listen to the interview. It's long, but it's worth it. You'll be shocked, and maybe that's what we need. But a lot of what we're going to talk about today comes from information from that podcast and various other sources. I really encourage you to listen to it, because this is a huge problem that if we don't get a handle on it quickly, there's going to be dire consequences for our country. And I'm not a negative Nancy. I don't believe living that way, but I really feel that strongly about this issue.
RFK alluded a few times in the past years, I suppose, a comparison between the American food system and the European food system. Generally speaking, there are things here that are allowed that are not allowed there, and maybe vice versa, I don't know. But generally speaking, Europeans, with their form of government and their almost dictatorial way, they don't like additives in their foods.
Well, it is kind of a dichotomy, because they, as far as the health of their citizens, just talking about the food system, I would say yes. There are, I don't know how many of you realize it, but beef is not, American beef is not allowed to be sold in Europe. GMO products. So anything from America that's a GMO product, which is just about everything, is not allowed in Europe.
Why the beef? Do you know?
Because we frequently put, I said beef, I should have said meat. Because our animals are generally fed a lot of soy. Cattle just depends on the situation. Cattle can have a lot of antibiotics. And I don't say that necessarily to scare people away from meat, because another day, I think an animal-based diet is 100% the way to go. I'm going to touch on that in a little bit. But I kind of feel like maybe Europeans want to have more control over their food system, so they don't let a lot of outside stuff in. And then certain things like ground beef, if you're not careful of the kind you're getting. I don't know if any of you remember the pink sludge.
The pink slime. Pink slime, I remember that.
Expose
Yes.
that was however many years ago. That's a legit thing. So that's just another additive in the food. While humans may process it okay, and it may not kill us right as we eat it, it's not an optimal situation for our health. But as far as actual health, I mean, Europeans do things a lot differently in regards to that. There's over 30,000 chemicals. I'll just speak to like the personal hygiene industry. There's 30,000 chemicals that they have banned in their personal hygiene, which would be cosmetics, toothpaste, deodorant, body wash, stuff like you put on your body, shampoo. They have over 30,000 banned. The U.S. has 7.
Are these chemicals that the industry desired to put in and they were evaluated and then said no? Or where does this list come from?
Well, they look at it differently. So the Europeans take a different viewpoint of Americans. American companies and the FDA and they basically like say you're Procter and Gamble and you make a new product, you make a new soap, and you say, okay, I think this will be great. I want to put it out on the market. You go to you go to the FDA, and you say, FDA, I've got this great soap. I want to put it out on the market. The FDA looks at you and says, okay, we trust that everything's on the up and up, and we'll go ahead and let it through.
So they're reactionary as opposed to being forward.
So 10 years down the road, when it comes back that there's something in that soap that's giving people cancer, then they pull it. Okay? Europe does the exact opposite. A company presents a product and it has to go through testing, and they wait to see if there's an issue. Now, a lot of that is helped by the fact of they've tested they've tested ingredients in the past, and they know there's not a problem with them. So if you stick with those ingredients, you're not going to have a problem with your product. But yes, to your point, America is more reactionary. And I mean, you can see that in other things. We all know this is how pharma works. Okay? Pharma puts a drug on the market, makes its money, and then 10, 15, 20 years down the road, when the public has had enough grief over it, they pull it. We've all seen that with the Fen
Back in the day,
thing.
right?
It's exactly what happened with, I'm blanking on the, like oxycodone, the opioid crisis. That's exactly what happened. The people that own the patent for hydroxycodone, literally, they have email evidence. They, not marketed it out, but they war gamed it out that they could make X amount of money before they would have to pull that product off the market. And that's exactly what happened. And even though they've had to pay out, I don't know, it might be billions of dollars by now at this point in settlements and being sued, they still made enough money to justify that. So they're making enough money that even though they're getting sued and having to pay the lawsuits, it was worth it to them.
Did this lawsuit bring these facts to light?
Oh yeah, it was either, I want to say it was the state of Alabama or the state of Arkansas. It was a state government that sued them. Some other states joined. But, I mean, this is the problem with Big Pharma. And, I mean, I'm not saying that all medicine is bad. We obviously, there's a role for that in our society. But these organizations, they continue to turn out drugs that impact people badly And they're never punished for it. They pay out enough lawsuits to keep people satisfied or happy or quiet, and they just keep on keeping on. So they never have to learn a lesson. And this has been going on for a really long time, and this is it's just a piece of the puzzle of why this country is so sick. And we are getting sicker as a nation. We aren't getting healthier. We're getting sicker. So we have more chronic conditions than ever, conditions that didn't exist 100 years ago.
Such as?
Well, I'm getting there. We have more chronic conditions. We're more depressed. We're becoming infertile as a nation. Our fertility is actually at a record low this year. And when I say that, it's not people choosing not to have babies. It's people can't make babies.
The former is a problem regardless, right?
Well, true, but that's another topic. Mm-hmm. Our life expectancy is going down. And we spend twice on our health care what other industrialized countries do.
I wonder why that is. Is it more costly, or is it more frequent, or are they trying to make health access a regular thing, trying to addict us to it?
Well, we're not going to solve that today. It's enough to know that Americans spend the most on health care, and we're the sickest nation on the planet.
That's not success.
So let's just talk about some of the numbers. So 50% of young adults are overweight or obese. Okay, so this is a national security issue. It's not just about the military. It's about who's going to be able to pay in Social Security. Okay, and just a little side note, for all of you out there who think, well, I paid into Social Security and I'm getting the money I paid into Social Security. Your government spent that a long time ago. So now, if you are taking Social Security right now, the people who are working are paying for your Social Security. So if we continue to have sick people who either die or can't work by the time they're 40, who is going to pay for Social Security? That's a whole nother issue. But let's get back to some numbers. 33% of Americans have prediabetes. And these are kind of like all over the place, but so that's 1 in 3 people. 1 in 3 young people.
Is that a young parameter, or is it all people?
It's young.
Wow.
1 in 3 are pre-diabetic.
Well, that's certainly something that didn't happen when we were kids.
No, and this is the thing I need people to understand. So we've been taught for so long that type 2 diabetes is what happens to you when you get old. But if you have young people getting it, then it's not what happens to you when you get old. There's another reason you're getting it. Along with 25% of young adults have fatty liver disease. This was unheard of. Just 50 years ago, people who had fatty liver disease were chronic alcoholics. They were not normal, regular, and they certainly weren't young people. 25% of adult women are on an antidepressant. And yes, this is related to the food system. Okay, this is the population as a whole. 80%, 80% of people are insulin resistant. And for anyone out there who doesn't know anything about insulin resistance, it's okay. I didn't. Most people don't. I think that's by design, but that's another topic. This is the root cause of all chronic disease in our society, being insulin resistant. And we're going to talk about that. But just know 80% of the country being insulin resistant is not a good thing. because what that means is type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, stroke, cancer, heart disease. That's what that means if that continues in your life. Let's talk about kids just for a minute. I touched on it, but I got my numbers a little out of order. 40 to 50% of school-age children have a chronic health condition. When I was a kid, this was unheard of.
What are some examples?
Well, I'm getting ready to give them to you.
Okay.
But I just want to side note that, I think about this kid I knew. When I was in elementary school, I knew one kid that was obese. And he also had a seizure disorder. And I didn't know anybody else that had anything wrong with it. There was no peanut allergies, none of that. Didn't have it back then. Now, I'm not saying everybody was healthy, but I'm saying we have a problem now because 40 to 50% of school-age children have a chronic health condition. So 1 in 36 have autism.
So is that because of more severe diagnosing it, even mild versions, or is that something else?
Well, does it matter? If you have it, why do you have it?
Yeah, it was certainly unheard of when we were kids.
Right. 1 in 8 have asthma. Now, there was asthma when I was a kid because I had it. But I don't think 1 in 8 people had it. And knowing what I know about health, I can point to some reasons why I probably had asthma.
Right.
And
surroundings.
And just on a side note, I haven't used an inhaler in a really long time since I changed some things in my lifestyle. So 1 in 20 have seizures. 1 in 12 kids have food allergies. Okay, so, and I just want to say, while I'm going down this list, I am not saying, if you have a child that has an issue, I'm not saying that it's obviously a concern. It's obviously, but I'm saying a lot of these issues are being driven by other things. That would include food allergies. 1 in 12 have food allergies. I mentioned when I was a kid, there was no, you couldn't bring anything peanut to school because of peanut allergies. I think about, I've even heard in some places, there's some schools where the kids who have peanut allergies have to eat all by themselves, at a table by themselves. That's horrible.
Because they're afraid that they'll get contamination.
Now, I do understand that with these children, that a lot of them, it's a life-threatening thing. So I'm not minimizing it. But I'm saying there's a reason these things are happening. So 1 in 9 kids has ADHD. 1 in 100, that's 10%, have...
1%.
I'm sorry, 1%, have a heart problem. Now, what is the future of our country if our children are sick, are this sick?
Not bright.
No. So there are a lot of factors. There are a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of pieces to the jigsaw puzzle of what's happening, and there's a lot of pieces to the jigsaw puzzle of becoming healthy. It's not just 100% one thing. But the biggest thing is your diet. It's what you're consuming, what you're eating, what your kids are eating, okay? And this all kind of came about because of what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said in his speech when he talked about, he actually, which is why I encourage you to go back and listen to his first speech because he highlighted 3 things that's obvious to me he feels very passionate about. And one of them is the health of children. And if we agree, okay, that, and I'm paraphrasing his quote, but he said something about if we can all agree that our children need to be healthy, then we should be able to come together just over that issue. Okay? And it really is imperative that people understand that what our children are eating them is affecting them and not in a good way. Because currently 70% of a child's diet, and some studies say as much as 80%, of a child's diet is ultra-processed food. Now, if you don't know what that is, that's food that has been changed and altered and created in a laboratory, okay, with ingredients that didn't exist even 100, probably even 50 years ago, although I'm dating myself. 50 years ago is... But my point is these ingredients didn't used to exist. And the process, just a little bit of history, the processed food industry was created by the same people that molded the cigarette industry.
Oh, really?
Yes. So, 70s, 80s, R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris got into the food business. Now, they've since sold various, pieces of it, sold off, and they've come under other companies or whatever. I would still add that there's about 12 companies that control all the food in the entire world. So that's another topic for another day. But what they did was they used the same model that they used in the cigarette industry. For those of you who don't know anything about the cigarette industry, cigarettes used to just be tobacco and paper.
And rolling paper.
Rolling paper, okay. I remember my grandfather rolling his cigarettes on his dining room table. Got out the box of tobacco and the little papers and rolled it right there and smoked it, okay? So nothing was in that product except tobacco. Now, I'm not saying...
Not even a filter, I bet, huh?
No. And I'm not saying tobacco's good. I don't want anybody to go out and start that. But it didn't have all the chemicals and additives in it that the cigarette industry put into their cigarettes years later to addict people and keep them addicted. And they were sued in a class action lawsuit, the cigarette, which was one of the things that changed. I mean, there was a lot of reasons that how we view cigarettes changed.
Do you know who the plaintiffs were? Was it a state or?
I don't remember. But they took that model and applied it to the food industry. So there are scientists who work all day long to come up with what they call the bliss point of any given food. And that is the perfect blend of fat, salt, and sugar to trigger addiction and overeating in a human being. Okay? Most of this food is not food. Okay? If you look on a can of Pringles, and we always say Pringles potato chips, they're not potato chips. Okay? So my point is they're making this stuff 100% addictive, like any drug. Okay? And as if that weren't bad enough, because your body doesn't recognize all the fake stuff. Okay? It doesn't recognize the chemicals, the additives, the seed oils. It doesn't recognize any of that because we've been eating real food for millions of years. We've only been eating this fake stuff for a very small window. Like, if you want to talk about, we've only been eating the chemicals and the additives and the seed oils for about 100 years. Okay? And some of it only about 50 years. Seed oils, really, in our food system, not very long. So, this has to change because our diet is really the number one thing that is driving all the chronic health conditions that we are seeing right now.
We'll be back after these words. Thanks for listening to the Transmitter 42 broadcast and podcast. If you would like to send us feedback or suggestions, please email us radioshow@t42.am or send a note via U.S. mail to Transmitter 42 LLC, P.O. Box 100, Remington, Virginia 22734. All of our podcasts are available for your favorite player. Visit t42.am for our catalog. And if you have amateur radio needs, please visit www.hamradio.me, Mary Elizabeth, to learn more about antennas and other amateur radio engineering topics. Thank you. We're back with Kimberly Huggins, who's going to continue our discussion on a new subtopic. What is that, Kimberly?
Well, this is like I was talking before about how it's all pieces of a puzzle, okay? And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. talked about this, and Callie Means is really big on this, that I don't think people really understand. A lot of people would say, well, we have the FDA and we have the USDA and, we have these organizations that are looking out for us. But are they really? And I just want to explain a little bit. So the FDA, the USDA, well, the FDA is Food and Drugs. The USDA is Agriculture. And the CDC is Disease. Okay? These organizations, even though they're government entities, and obviously they're supported by the taxpayers, they are controlled by for-profit companies that pay them.
Pay their fees for regulatory admissions.
For anything. And these agencies are loath to have the spigot turned off. So it's more than a conflict of interest. Once again, here's the numbers. 75% of the Food and Drug Administration's funding comes from Big Pharma. Now, how confident are you that a drug that is presented for FDA approval, if it's harmful, how confident are you that it's going to be denied if the FDA is getting 75% of its income, of its funding from the drug company that wants its drug approved? Do you think the FDA is more likely to think about you or think about its funding? 75% of news agency revenue, that's the ads that you see on TV during the news broadcast that you watch, 75% of that comes from Big Pharma. So when you are listening to your friendly whoever broadcaster give you the news, I'll use Anderson Cooper because I know this for a fact, 75% of the ads on his show he's funded by Big Pharma. So do you think Anderson Cooper is going to give you a news item that is critical of Big Pharma? Chances are not.
And it happens on both sides of the aisle, does it not?
It does. It does.
So pick your favorite cable news broadcast, you'll find pharma supplying funding for a good chunk of it, if not most. Right.
So, but I mean, it's even deeper than that. So I mentioned those two. The American Academy of Pediatrics. The main funders of the American Academy of Pediatrics are, or I should say, two companies that make formula, Abbott Nutrition and Mead Johnson. what if they made crappy formula? Are you confident the American Academy of Pediatrics is going to tell you that that's crappy formula? And I would just like to add here, because it is a pet peeve of mine, one of the top recommended baby formulas on the market is straight up seed oils and sugar. 46% corn oil, 13% soybean oil. I forget the other percentages, but the first 4 ingredients.
And this is them crowing about it, right? This is on their...
Well, I mean, when you put American Academy of Pediatrics approved, people think it's okay to give their kids. But I'm telling you, the game is rigged. The companies that make the baby formula are paying the American Academy of Pediatrics to say that. You would like to think they wouldn't say it if it wasn't true, but that's just not how the game works. So, I covered all that. So, this one will bake your bagel. We always hear, ooh, big oil. Big oil has too much influence in the political process. I want you to know the healthcare industry provides 5 times more funding to political campaigns than the oil industry does. Just some other interesting facts. The American Diabetes Association accepts millions of dollars from Coca-Cola. Now, do you really think they're going to tell you that you shouldn't drink Coca-Cola? My guess is no, because they're getting millions of dollars from Coca-Cola. If you could give them millions of dollars, they might listen to you. But since you can't, they're probably not.
You want to conjecture on the motivation of Coca-Cola? Why they're giving money like that away to, and basically...
Sure. They're giving the money away so the American Diabetes Association doesn't tell people to not drink Coca-Cola. It's not because they feel bad that people are addicted to Coca-Cola. And just a side note, I'm sorry, but if you're drinking Diet Coke or Coke Zero or whatever the latest Coke whatever, it's not any better for your health. Now, this next one I think is really sad, but it's truth. And it's every medical institution in the country. Over 50% of the Harvard Medical School budget touches Big Pharma in some way. So my point in saying that is all the medical schools in the country, and especially the big ones, Harvard, Stanford, receive money from Big Pharma. So is it really a surprise that all the doctors are trained to medicate rather than heal? Because that's what's happening. They're not trained to look at the whole patient. They're trained to silo conditions. And what ends up happening is you'll see a patient, okay, by the time they're 50, 55, by the way, the average 50-year-old is on 7 different medications in our country right now.
How old?
50. So that's us. 7 different medications is the average. So you're going to see a patient. They'll have 10 different issues. This is the way our current system works. 10 different issues. They'll send you to 10 different specialists, put you on 10 different drugs, and ultimately probably 10 different surgeries, when there's more than likely one root cause for most of those issues.
Nutrition.
Well, the root cause of the issues would be insulin resistance, which is mostly solved by nutrition. Okay? So medical education is being underwritten by pharmaceutical companies, and I'm just going to tie up this little part right here, and then we're going to talk about maybe what we can do. I'm going to read a quote, And I don't know if this was Callie Means or Sister Casey, but it's so true. They write, the system is rigged against the American patient to create diseases and profit off of them. And it's happening at every level of society, in our food, our tech, and our pharmaceuticals. And then I truly feel, okay, this is not them talking, this is me. I really do feel that, and it didn't always used to be this way, but that's why we have to fix it. People are now seen as a resource to be exploited, however the powers that be manage to do it. So, piggybacking off of Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s speech, and like I said, Hubs can tell you that I'd been hoping for a while now that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. would come into the administration. I mean, just straight up, I want him as the Cabinet Health and Human Services, because that is over all of these organizations. That is over the FDA, the CDC, the National Institutes of Health. Not sure about the USDA. I'd have to check that one. But somebody has to do something. And that is going to be much more likely to happen if people like all of us out here in People Land keep the pressure on. So a couple of things I think need to happen. You need to be engaged. You need to push. You need to make yourself aware, because if maybe you have a health condition, don't think it's too late for you, because it's not. That's another show. But maybe you have a health condition. But if you have people in your life that you love, if you have children, if you have grandchildren, this is why it's important to be engaged. You need to help, and you can start small, but you need to help push for programs, initiatives, and hopefully legislation to get these poisons and addictive chemicals out of our food system. That's the only way. Now, in the meantime, of course, it starts at home. So the first step would be you got to take care of you and your family. So stop buying these products. Now, that's easier said than done. I get it. Because if you go in the grocery store today, 90% of what is in the grocery store is not fit for human consumption. I literally mean that. Okay? So when I was a kid...
Sweetwater being soda is a perfect example, I would imagine.
When I was a kid, there was probably about 300 items in the grocery store to buy. There's over 30,000 now. And most of that is not real food. It is not, yes, it is something you can eat, and it may satisfy a craving for a while, but it is not nutrition, and there's a difference. So you have to stop buying these products. If you've got to look at the ingredient label, and a good rule of thumb is if it comes in a box, or a bag, it's dead food. But if you don't understand the ingredients, don't buy it. If it sounds like, if you read it and you're like, what is that? Don't buy it.
I stop when the ingredient list passes about 6.
That's another good point. If it's got more than 4 or 5 ingredients on the list, put it back. It'll get easier the more you do it. Okay? This includes seed oils. This is the hardest one because seed oil is in everything. Right? And it's cheap. That's why it's in everything. You got to stop consuming it. It causes so many bad things in your body. Our bodies don't recognize it. When they tell you don't cook with butter, don't cook with fat, don't cook with blah, 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 don't listen. They say don't listen. That's what you need to be doing. Get rid of the canola oil, get rid of the soybean oil, get rid of the corn oil. They call them all vegetable oils because they think that sounds good and healthy, but they're junk. Get rid of them.
And that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people because we all grew up with Crisco, for example.
Or, we were young when, my mother used vegetable oil for everything. And most everyone remembers country crock.
Yeah.
Country crock butter, which it isn't.
It's margarine, right?
Margarine. It's not good for you. Usual butter. Butter is good for you. And don't worry about your cholesterol. That's another side note. It's time to start advocating for alternate and better food choices. Okay. So this means the school board needs to be on the hot seat. Now, it is true that schools are federally funded. The lunch programs, the breakfast programs are federally funded. There's a reason for that, but we won't get in that today. But the local school boards still have control of how that money is spent. And if your community thinks it's important enough, there's no reason alternate choices cannot be brought in. Okay? So you've got to have alternate and better food choices in the schools. And I would also add in the hospitals and in the nursing homes. Because these people are being fed garbage food. Now, I know a lot of people, well, they're in the nursing home. What difference does it make? It makes a big difference. It can make a difference on whether someone has dementia or doesn't have dementia. The food is that important. And then I would also add, this is part of legislation, I think. Although I don't know if this can come straight from a cabinet secretary. It's something to look into. But we've got to stop ads on TV for drugs. It's ridiculous. It wasn't always that way. And
we don't see ads for tobacco anymore.
Right.
So it can be done.
And we are, just so you know, we are only one of 2 countries in the entire world that allows this. It's ludicrous.
Us in New Zealand, correct?
Correct. And it's, if you look at the commercials, okay, a lot of people, I had this discussion with my son once. He's like, well, I don't pay any attention to the commercials. I don't pay any attention to the ads. Well, they have them for a reason. They've done the marketing research. They know they work, or they wouldn't pay to have them on the air.
They're selling hope.
Right. But I would say they're selling hope through a legacy of chronic illness and addiction.
Which is
not
one
hope.
hand feeding the other, so to speak. Because the bad food system supplies the people in need of medication.
Correct. So change, while I'm excited if, it all works out, that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. gets the opportunity to help children, which I sincerely believe he's genuine about that. When the man was talking about it, he was crying. And I don't think he was faking it. I really feel like he's being genuine in his passion for that. But ultimately, real change is not going to last until people understand. It's just like with cigarettes. People didn't really understand how bad they were. Okay? When we were kids, everybody smoked. Literally everyone. You smoked in the doctor's office, for Pete's sake. There was a smoking section in my high school.
Yep, ours too. The smoker's court.
Which we tell that to our kids now, and they're like, what?
Yeah.
Like, I can't believe it. So it can change. It may take a while, but it has to start. It has to start somewhere. And it can start with you. It can start with being engaged. You have to know, I say all the time, it doesn't matter what happened before. If you didn't know, you didn't know. When you know better, do better. So be engaged. Push for programs, initiatives, legislation to change. Stop buying the junk. Starve the beast. All they respond to is money. Make them feel it. Advocate for better food in your schools. And advocate to get these dumb, ridiculous ads off of TV.
With the dancing happy fat people.
I mean, it's just like you said, they're selling, and the sad thing about that is they want you to think you don't have control and you need them to help you when 90% of it is in your control. 90% of so many things is in your control. You just have to realize that.
I don't have any details, and perhaps you don't either, but I'm starting to hear some blowback, I guess, on the Ozempic and the other products like that. That's the injection, correct, for weight loss?
Right. You say blowback, what do you mean?
I'm hearing that there's symptoms that are starting to be making the press.
Well, I know that, and I mean, I encourage people, I understand why you would want to take these medications, okay? For those of you who don't know, I was carrying about 40 extra pounds than I am right now. So I understand, what it's like to be overweight. And I can only guess how much more difficult it would be if you're severely overweight, okay? But just as a little side note on that, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So the skinny, pardon the pun, on semaglutide injection drugs like Wegovy and Ozempic and Mounjaro and whatever other ones out there that I don't know about, it's when people say they want to lose weight, they always mean fat. Mm-hmm. They want to lose fat. Okay. Well, 40% of the weight you lose is muscle mass.
With those kinds of drugs.
And that is just not something you can have going or ever. You should never, ever want to lose muscle mass. Muscle mass is longevity. After the age of 30, you lose 1%. If you're not in the gym, I don't even say that, but if you're not lifting weight, however you do it, you don't have to be in a gym, but I just use that because that's the easiest. If you're not lifting weights on a regular basis, you're losing 1% of your muscle mass every year. If you're 60 years old and you think, oh, it's too late for me to do anything. No, if you get your butt in the gym and lift on a regular basis, you will start building muscle mass, okay? And muscle mass is what's going to keep you from falling and breaking your hip when you get older. And if you break your hip when you get older, it's basically 6 months and you're out of here. Mm-hmm. You die.
Just like my mother.
Okay. If you want to live alone, you have to have muscle mass to do that. You have to be able to sit to stand. You have to be able to get yourself out off of the toilet. Get yourself up and down out of a chair. Get yourself in and out of a bed to be able to live by yourself. If you want to continue to be independent in your old age, you cannot lose your muscle mass. Okay. And that's just the side point of gut paralysis and suicidal ideation that also goes along with these drugs. Now, probably what's going to happen is those drugs are going to be left on the market for 10 or 15 or 20 years so they can make all their money that they're making off of these things, pay out a few, people who sue them, and then they'll pull it off the market. My point is, it's the easy way. It may even work for you, but there's another way, a better way. And you can do it. It's not easy. There'll be good days and bad days. But the alternative with these drugs, I wouldn't risk it.
So RFK Jr. has touched the third rail in a good way. Let's hear one final clip from an interview some time ago with Bill Maher.
To me, and I think the framers of our Constitution believe this too, that the worst thing that you can do in a democracy is to censor speech. If you have a government that can silence its critics, it has license for any atrocity. But once you cede a power like that to a government, it will never give it back. and it will always ultimately abuse it to the maximum extent possible. So, today they're letting pharmaceutical companies censor doctors and scientists who differ with the official orthodoxies on COVID. But I've been around long enough to know that once the big tech firms know that they can get away with that, the oil companies will be back next in line to censor their critics. The coal companies, the chemical companies, the processed food industry, everybody else is going to get in line. Once we say that's okay, we've let a genie out of the bottle. And that happened during the Biden administration like no other in history.
So he's a Kennedy. I guess there's been 3 Kennedys who have amounted to something. Obviously, JFK, Bobby Kennedy, his father, and Teddy Kennedy.
Well, I think one of the kids is in Congress, but I'm not sure about that.
I do remember that, yeah.
I mean, one of the...
But we don't hear much from him.
No, I guess it would be one of the grandchildren, maybe. I don't know.
All the news is, of course, bashing on RFK Jr., but he's using his clout, and I think he's using it well to identify a big problem here. So one has to wonder what's next. He's done a complete shakeup to finally get people to notice with this whole Trump thing. I guess he feels completely betrayed by the Democrats. That's one problem. I only hope that Trump does believe in what he says and tries to take some of his warnings to heart and moves things forward.
Well, I think Kennedy was really smart in that he gave his speech and then he went and spoke at Trump's event. And he pretty much put out in public there in front of all those people what kind of him and Trump agreed to. So it's pretty much on record. We'll see what happens.
Make America healthy again.
Right, which is the goal of all of this. And back to, we should all be able to agree on this. This has nothing to do with politics. We want our kids healthy. We want our grandchildren healthy. And while we may disagree on exactly how to get there, some things aren't up for debate. And just kind of piggybacking off of his point of censorship right there, that's a real problem because it's already happening.
With the networks trying to defend their cash cow of advertising, for one thing.
Right, and companies are shadow banning and just downright pulling videos or podcasts or whatever that don't toe the line. And the only thing I would say about that is some people would say, well, you have to do that if it's not correct information. Okay, you're a smart person. You can determine whether the information is relevant or not. But the bigger point is who decides? Who decides what's right, what's wrong, what you're going to believe, what you're going to follow, what you're going to do?
Ultimately, people are responsible for their own actions, but I get it. They're flooded with information that overwhelms them, and so they pick the easiest route. So I'm glad he's there. This is not the unity party, but it's the closest thing we're going to get. I know Brett Weinstein is all for it. He wanted to be the VP pick, but this should be good. I think we're going to have a much better chance at seeing this administration do something good if it wins. And, if there's nothing else, I hope the Democrats adopt some of his policies if they do, and I'm not holding my breath.
Well, they wouldn't talk to him, so that's the first giveaway on that one.
Well, thanks, Kimberly, and we'll catch you next time on Transmitter 42.
Transmitter 42.